Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Now, getting back into some Naruto 5e stuff, if you read the title. Today I got 5 jutsus that literally any character can use. Now, to be clear, the reason that is the title is because the criteria for this was they have to be non-elemental, so that anybody can use them, and it can't be any form of clan jutsu, because then obviously again it's locked behind some form of wall that your character has to get around somehow, some way, whether that be a feat or being the clan or whatever the case may be. But for these 5 jutsu, it's something that no matter who you are playing, you can pick them up and more than likely find some use out of them. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about here is Chakra Blow. Now, while yes, this one is best for people that use weapon attacks regularly, pretty much no matter what you are, even if you're a ninjutsu specialist, you might end up needing to make a weapon attack, whether you're running low on chakra, or whether they're up in your face and you just don't have any close range jutsu to use. And whenever you do, this is a really handy E-rank jutsu to have, because one, it's super cheap. It costs 2 chakra. Not only that, but the damage is going to scale up as you level up without any extra cost. So what happens is once you hit 5th level, instead of being an additional d6, it becomes an additional 2d6. Which mathematically is amazing. You're paying a singular chakra for an extra d6 dice, which is crazy. If you think about it in terms of just paying 1 chakra to add a d6 onto your damage, that'd be nuts. You could pump out some serious damage in 1 turn. Now, I understand it doesn't work exactly that way because you can't use this an infinite amount of times per round, but it's still really good value. So that's why we're putting it in the number 5 slot for things that any character should consider. Next up at number 4, we have String Light Formation, which again is really good for how cheap it is. For a very little amount of chakra, you can lock yourself and an enemy from moving at all, which is so nice. And what they do is they have to make a charisma saving throw, and if they fail it, you and them are inherently connected and are both locked in place at 0 movement speed. This is really useful, especially for early on characters being an E rank. If you're going up against some kind of boss enemy, which again at low levels, they're probably not going to have a whole lot of crazy range jutsu, and maybe they're very melee dependent, maybe they're very buki jutsu dependent. If that's the case, this jutsu is going to work wonders because you lock them down and your teammates just get to do whatever the heck they want. Now, on each of their turns, they do get to try to remake this save. But so what? If you lock them down for even a singular turn, you have done so much for your team. Not only that, even if it's not a boss, you can lock this person down, and maybe it's like the main big bad one or the scariest one, and then focus on getting rid of the fodder enemies and then go back to the big guy. It's just an extremely useful jutsu, and again, like all these jutsu are going to be, are extremely cheap. Now at number 3, we have Enhanced Defense, which I considered putting this one lower, but I have my reasoning. And my main reasoning, although it does take your action, is it is an extremely powerful defensive tool at very early stages of the game. So, for Enhanced Defense, what it's going to do is for 2 chakra, you gain resistance to any piercing, slashing, or bludgeoning damage, which is going to be most weapon attacks as long as it's not some kind of nonsense being added to it, which in early game is typically the case. So, being an E-rank jutsu, this is going to be killer if your group has a main dedicated tank. Now, it's going to depend how your squad plays, how y'all's combats typically go, but if you have a main tank that's really frontlining and they're getting out there and they're taking a lot of hits, this can be life-saving, especially when you're levels 2, 3, maybe even 4. You don't have a whole lot of health to work with, and it can be simply 2, maybe 3 attacks that bring you down. But if you're regularly spending just a mere 2 chakra, which you can do plenty of times, to then gain that resistance, you're taking half damage from all of these hits, if they even hit you. So you are inherently almost doubling the amount of rounds that you're now going to be alive, allowing your maybe support teammates or your damaging teammates or whatever the case may be to really get in and do their work. So while it may seem rough to take away your action in order to do this, it's a really powerful effect early game. And again, that's what these are focused on, are cheap early game effects that pretty much everybody should consider. This one though, leaning towards tanks. Now at number 2, we have, I think, is the single best E-rank defensive option that anybody can use, and that's going to be Clone Technique. Now, Clone Technique is disgusting for a few reasons. One, again, it's 2 chakra, and it's crazy that this is 2 chakra. But what happens is you bring up 2 clones, to the sides of you. They must stay within 5 feet. So do understand, if you're taking this clone technique jutsu, this isn't one that you can use for a whole lot of roleplay situations where you can pee poof them and make them go do something else a little further away. They must stay next to you. And it is worded in a way that if the roleplay involves them getting like hit in any way or violently shook, maybe by an earthquake or something like that, they do pee poof pretty easily. But in combat, what happens is if anyone targets you, whether it's a jutsu, a weapon attack, whatever, you can spend your reaction to, for starters, making them roll a d6 and subtract that from their attack roll, which means at a bare minimum, they're taking a 5% loss to even hit. And at peak, they have a 30% less chance to hit, which is absolutely absurd. Disregarding that absolute nonsense, they then are going to hit a clone. So if it's a targeted thing, it's not hitting you even if it hits. That's absurd. And this reaction is a free reaction. So you spent 2 chakra to give yourself a reaction that not only gives them less of a chance to hit, but if they do hit, it's not even hitting you, and it's just getting rid of a clone. Now, obviously, if the enemy has AoE, all right, it's not going to do a whole lot for you. But that's pretty much any clone in the game. Now, what's even more crazy about this is, just like a lot of other small E-rank jutsus, it's gonna scale up the higher level you are, eventually giving you 3 clones, 4 clones, even 5 clones if your campaign goes, I believe, to level 17. So again, it's just absolutely absurd, the option you get. Now, the only thing to note about this is it is concentration. So if somehow the enemy finds some weird way to hit you through these clones, there is a chance you lose concentration on it. Also, it depends how you're playing concentration. If you see how we use concentration in our Naruto 5e campaign, we didn't do the thing where you're paying every round for it because it's really hard to keep track of, and we just found that kind of annoying. Did that make concentration a little broken? Sure, I'm sure it did. But at the end of the day, if you're making concentration where it actually costs something every turn, maybe this is a little less great because it's costing you, but still, having a free reaction that not only lessens their chance of hitting, but then if it does hit, completely diverting the attack from you, is absolutely insane, and I would strongly consider putting this on any Naruto 5e character that you create. Now finally, last but not least, we have Chakra Hands, which D&D has a counterpart to this, where basically for a mere singular point of chakra, you can create these kind of ethereal hands, so to speak, with your chakra that can do things for you. What can they do, you might ask? It really depends on your DM. They try to get fairly specific of like it can't attack or do things of that nature because they're not like super strong or powerful, but I want to specify that if you are an extremely creative D&D player and you really like to have a tool that is really good in roleplay and can theoretically also be good in combat if you're really smart about it and you're thinking about what it could possibly help you with, well then Chakra Hands is just absolutely beautiful, perfect, amazing. Now again, this is really going to depend on your DM as to how they want to rule the Chakra Hands. And I will say, before putting this on your character, I would talk to your DM first about it, because you're going to want to get clarifications as to what these hands can and can't do. Again, it does clarify very specifically, you cannot make attacks, you can't pick up a sword and attack someone with these hands or anything like that. But maybe your DM allows you to push something on top of someone. So let's say there's a light object up top and you push it over to distract them, giving your teammate advantage on an attack or something of that nature, right? You can get very creative with your situations, but it's going to really depend on the game. It's going to depend on what the DM is actually going to allow with Chakra Hands. So again, highly recommend this on pretty much every character. Also know what your DM says, and as a last caveat, and this isn't to be mean to anybody, but if you know you're not the most creative D&D player in the world, and you kind of just come in to have a good time, play with some friends, and you don't like to think too hard about, in some sense, solving a puzzle while you're fighting, they're usually not super worth it, because then otherwise it's purely roleplay, but again, that can also be fun. So just something to look into, and I made it my number 1 because of its extremely versatile abilities as to what it can and in some situations can do. So there you have it. Those are my top 5 jutsus that any character can learn and take advantage of because they are non-elemental, they are E rank, so they are good for everybody. There are no restrictions on them. Some of them, again, might be better for others, right? You're not always going to put enhanced defense on your support player, and you're not always going to have something like some cheap extra weapon attack damage on, again, a support character, because they might not do that very much. So some of them have a little more niche application, but nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed this type of video. If you did, let me know down in the comments and I can do some more jutsu type stuff. And if you can, hit the sub button. Alrighty, we're actually creeping up on 2K, which is wild because I feel like we hit 1K not very long ago. So y'all are amazing. Anyway, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.